What is a better route for nurses, H1B or EB3? Chris, you want to take this one?
Yeah, so like a lot of things, better is a term that you, the nurse herself, have to assess. Maybe we can just take a minute though and talk about the pros and cons of each. So the EB3, which is the sort of the usual way that nursing cases are filed in the United States, that works very nicely. It upon the issuance of the green card, upon approval, when the nurse enters the United States, she obtains a green card, as does her spouse, as do, by the way, any under 21-year-old children who, and I'm speaking generally here, enter at the same time as the nurse herself. So that's nice because the spouse immediately gets work authorization, and the whole family all have U.S. permanent residency cards, which means they are on the path to U.S. citizenship if they are so inclined to ultimately become naturalized in the United States. So that's one path. I think that's generally been the preferred path. There's one downside, which is with retrogression. What was taking about 9 months is now taking maybe 18 or 24 months. And, unfortunately, I suspect retrogression will continue to get a little worse into 2024 and 2025. So the upside, everyone gets a green card and work authorization. Downside, the timing of the process. On the H1B side, on the upside, much quicker. If you qualify for an H1B and your employer is willing to sponsor you for an H1B, and you have your nursing license and you have your visa screen, and we file your H1B today, that's great. Today's August 11th. You can probably be in the United States in 60 or 90 days. So super fast. That's what's nice about the H1B. In fact, that's the real appeal of the H1B, but there's some downsides. Number one, your spouse does not, the spouse and kids can enter the United States, but they don't get green cards. They get something called an H4, and an H4 does not allow work authorization. It does allow children to go to school, though. Normally, though, within a reasonable amount of time, let's call it 6 or 9 months, the spouse can obtain work authorization if the employer is also willing to file your green card and your spouse's green card. So you do not get the green card immediately and your spouse does not get the green card. It's going to take that, let's call it 18 months or 2 years under current processing times to obtain that green card. About halfway through that process, your spouse will be able to obtain work authorization, though. So, it's not great, but it's not terrible. Also, you're not getting permanent residency right away. You're not getting permanent residency again for about 2 years. And I'm speaking for all folks right now, except for Indian nationals and Chinese nationals, by the way. So you can enter the United States, so that's good. But you don't get the green card, which isn't so great. But you will get it eventually. It'll just take an extra 2 years. But here's the big one. Not that many U.S. employers actually are allowed to file for your H-1B. There's two main things that an employer has to meet to be able to sponsor a nurse for an H-1B. Number one, the position that the hospital is offering has to require a bachelor's degree. And you, the nurse, have to have the bachelor's degree. But remember, those are two standards there, not one. Many Philippine and overseas nurses that we see do hold a BSN, a Bachelor's of Science in Nursing, but that's not all of it. The employer in the U.S. has to require a bachelor's degree, and the majority of employers in the United States do not have as the minimum requirement a bachelor's degree. The minimum requirement they have is an associate's degree. And so those employers are not eligible to sponsor nurses for H-1Bs. Having said that, I have seen in the many years I've been doing this, more and more hospitals and healthcare facilities are beginning to prefer, and some are even beginning to require bachelor's degrees for some nursing positions within their organization. So that's one issue, which is that not that many U.S. employers meet that standard of requiring a bachelor's degree. There's even a second piece to this, which is we have something called the H-1B quota in this country. It operates somewhat similar to retrogression, not entirely, but conceptually, it's the same idea, which is there's a cap on the number of H-1Bs that the U.S. government can issue in any year. And This past year, only about 20 or 25% were allowed to get H1Bs, which is to say it was oversubscribed. So essentially, we have an H1B lottery in March. Everybody who wants an H1B puts their name in a lottery. And again, about 25%, 20 or 25% of those were able to obtain the H1B. The other 75 or 80%, unfortunately, they just lost the lottery. They have to try again in March of 2024. Last piece of this, Danielle, very few but certain organizations in the United States are what are called H1B cap exempt, meaning that those employers who sponsor H1B nurses, or really any H1Bs, do not have to go through that H1B lottery. They're essentially allowed to hire all the H1Bs that they have job openings for. So again, in sum, broadly speaking, one, position must require a bachelor's degree for an H1B. Two, it's generally helpful if that employer is what's called H1B cap exempt. So bringing this all the way back to the question, what's better, H1B and green card? I think you have to consider your situation. You have to consider the companies that you are applying for here in the United States.
Thank you, Chris. That was a very good overview for all of our nurses. I think the takeaway is that it really depends. It's hard to say. You have to weigh for your individual situation what's going to be best for you, what's going to be best for your family, especially if you have a family that you plan on coming with. So some pros and cons with the H1B versus the EB3. Connetics does have some H1B employers. I will say the majority of our employers are EB3, but we do have some H1B employers. We have that option available. So please apply on our website, conneticsusa.com/apply, if you are interested in finding out more about that.